Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited for all of you to meet and learn from today's guest and fellow entrepreneur, because being from Boston, I can safely say that this guy is not only wicked smart, but he's doing extremely impactful work when it comes to the next generation of talent in the job force. And it even feels weird saying the next generation because they're here. I'm starting to feel old these days because the next generation is already here, bringing a new set of skills, a new set of mindset challenges, a new set of mindset opportunities, so much that all of us as business owners not only can learn from and that we can maximize for our own missions and the own work that we are doing, but also to set them up for success as well. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Injil Muhammad Jr. Injil is the co-founder and CEO of Buddle, which is a platform helping companies engage and retain, both sides of the coin, their Gen Z talent. Buddle empowers young professionals to cultivate essential soft skills, bridging the gap between academic preparation and career success. Before founding Buddle, Injil honed his analytical expertise at Goldman Sachs, where he worked in the investment management division trading mortgage-backed securities. He graduated cum laude from Harvard College with a degree in applied mathematics and has long been passionate about helping others unlock their full potential in both academic and professional pursuits. Injil is committed to advancing career readiness and fostering opportunities for the next generation of leaders, which for so many of us in our businesses, that's the type of talent that's going to take us to that next level. Injil's going to pave that path for us today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Injil Muhammad. All right, Injil, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's truly a pleasure. So thank you for having me.
Heck yes. I've been looking forward to this interview for so long now because I think the work that you're doing, obviously, we can't ignore it. Whether people think they can or they can't, we absolutely cannot, because time is going by, generations are changing in the workforce. So before we get into that stuff, Injil, we have to talk about you and why you care so much about this. So take us beyond the bio. Who's Injil? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Sure. So I feel like for most of my life, I've been in a situation where I've sort of tried to figure something out and then very quickly turned around and said, hey, how can I help other people do this? So for example, when I was in college, I started a program to help high school students like get into college while I was still in college. And so I was like, hey, well, I just got into Harvard or whatever. So does anyone else need help getting in? Let me try to show you kind of what I've done. And that's been kind of a recurring theme throughout, my life. I think I've felt like I've been privileged to be in a bunch of different spaces, have a bunch of different opportunities. And I want to say, it's not as difficult to kind of be in these spaces and succeed as it would perceive to be from the outside. And so just kind of like breaking down those barriers has been something that I've been really passionate about for some time.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I will say, as a natural helper myself, I like seeing how many fellow entrepreneurs are just those natural helpers. Injil, I would argue that for a lot of people, if they're wondering what business should I start, just look at the things that you enjoy helping others with, because there's a business behind all of that. That's at the root of business, is really good service. And when we talk about service, what I really appreciate about your business is the fact that you see the changing times, and there's a lot to be said about Gen Z in the workplace. A lot of the major headlines will talk about the negative aspects of Gen Z and how they grew up entirely with technology. I always joke as a millennial that I'm the last generation that I didn't grow up with a cell phone in my pocket. I didn't have one until I was in my late teenage years. Whereas Injil, you're younger than me. You probably did grow up with a lot more tech than I did. You might not remember dial-up internet in the days of AOL and AOL Instant Messenger. So how are we supposed to make sense of Gen Z? It's such a unique generation in the workforce now.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I think, technically Gen Z starts in 1997, but I think there's a big difference culturally from whether you were in school or out of school during the pandemic, right? And so 2020 was my junior year of college. March 10th, I'll never forget, I got this email that said, hey, you have 5 days to leave. March 15th, you got to get out and you're never coming back. We were like, that seems drastic for a flu, but whatever. Packed up all our stuff, left. And then, I graduated virtually a year and a half later, and I never was able to kind of go back to campus. And so when you're in college, when something that transformative happens, your perception of what the workplace is not informed by having that experience in person, right? So like when you think about work from home and that being like a perk for people my generation and younger, that's more of an inalienable right. Everybody was working from home. Why do I need to work somewhere for 5 years to get this right? Understanding the implications of having AI in the workplace, like, the fact that junior talent tasks typically that were done by people that didn't have any experience can be done very easily by, technology that, used to be rudimentary, but now can do sometimes an even better job than someone who has no experience. That has a big implication for how we're experiencing, what it means to start out in a new role. And so there's a lot of different, I would say, macro, not necessarily headwinds, but just factors that have us having a different experience with the workplace. And I think the pandemic is a big point of that has shifted how we perceive that kind of environment. So, I would say that the biggest thing that underpins all of this is just empathy, right? As you know, Brian, I think there's so much that's needed from this perspective of these people have a different experience than I have, and we're both working towards the same goal. So how can we empower one another, right? Because it's not just a one-way street to work towards that goal collectively. That's kind of the outcome that we're all looking for. But I think there's a lot more dialogue that's necessary, one might say, to make that happen.
Yeah, Injil, I want to call something out there. I think it's so brilliant the way that you answered that question, because here I was going straight into the technology route as that one of the big differences between generations. But you immediately took it and you started with the pandemic and you talked about, perception, the environment in which we went through school, the environment in which we entered the workplace, is that you have a different perception of the way that things operate and the way that you can operate successfully. Because to your point, I think it's such a powerful point that I really want to echo here is you say, we all have the same goals. We all want all of our projects to be successful. We just have a different way of viewing it. So I think that's the perfect natural segue to talk about what you're doing with Buddle, because everything that I've seen about Buddle is you are not just providing a service, but you talk about the need for having more open dialogue. It seems to me like Buddle's plugging that gap, and you guys are collectively that voice about Gen Z in the marketplace. Introduce us to Buddle, how you got there, and what gap that's plugging.
Sure. So Buddle, in a sentence, helps company with retention and engagement among their junior talent, right? And so, your company, you fly across the country, going to campuses, you recruit, you have internship programs, you bring them in, and then, maybe the junior talent isn't as successful as you thought, or maybe they leave after, 6 months, a year, 2 years. That's a pretty rough ROI. And, you're kind of stunting the growth of the future of your organization. And so if you're in an environment where, Gen Z has a 20 percentage point lower likelihood than any other generation, even the millennials, to stay in a job longer than 3 years. And so that's like benchmark for age as well. And so there's a market shift in how our generation is experiencing the workplace and experiencing the concept of company loyalty and how much we're supposed to put in before we expect something in return. And so that dynamic is kind of what we target specifically, right? And so how do we do it? There's kind of three pillars of what Buddle does: coaching, connection, and community. So first off, we need help. We, being the junior talent, the people coming into the workplace, help to understand how to navigate this environment. It's very different than college, like extremely different. And I think that's really understated and undersold when you get into the workplace. I know I had a bunch of issues when I started. I'm happy to get into those. But there's certain aspects of your experience that just need to be articulated. And it's not rocket science, but it's important to just have that kind of that perspective. That's one. And then connection, right? You need mentors, you need sponsors, you need people that you can ask your dumb questions to, like human to human interaction. And so we provide a network of coaches that can provide that support. And a lot of it is not just necessarily, hey, how should I respond to this email? But the confidence to believe that you deserve to be in that environment and are in a space where you can grow, right? Because the confidence piece is a much bigger factor than I think a lot of people give credit for. And lastly is community. If you're trying to build a sustainable workforce of junior talent, they have to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves and also have a community amongst one another. I think that's like kind of understated. Sometimes you'll have like people in a bunch of silos and it's like, oh, well, you should just do your work that your boss tells you and don't worry about the other person on the other team who's probably going through the same issues that you are. Trying to increase the connectivity among the junior talent is a big part of what we do as well.
Yeah, hearing you even use that word, and obviously you had an awesome career in your 9-to-5 world before you started Buddle, and hearing you talk about silos is here on an entrepreneurial podcast, Injil, where my head goes, I'm just like, that's corporate speak. And of course it is corporate speak because that's the reality of what these huge organizations look like. Whereas as entrepreneurs, the lines for sure are much more blurred. We all wear so many more hats. I want to talk about that though, because when I do think about your college educational experience, and for example, you know the school that I went to, Bentley University, right down the road from Harvard. And I think about how many group projects we did. And we were all so connected, to use one of your 3 pillars. And then, of course, when you enter the workplace, all of a sudden, instead of being so interconnected, you have a specific role. And you worked at Goldman Sachs, which is one of the most traditional institutions out on Wall Street. And I wonder, how different is that corporate environment? You talk about some of your early struggles. Go a bit deeper for us there, because it is a different world than the one that we grew up in, the one that we were educated in, and the one that we all find in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. So I would say the biggest difference for me, at least, is that when you're in school and someone gives you something to do and you do it 100% correctly, you get an A+. Like if you got all the questions right on the exam, you've been taught the material the entire semester, you have an exam, you get every question right. You're the best student ever. You're valedictorian, whatever. If you do 100% of what your manager asks of you in the workplace, they're like, yeah, that's your job. Like, that's why we're paying you, right? And so there's like kind of a different set of expectations that you're supposed to achieve. And it's just very uncorrelated with necessarily like how much time you're spending on something. I think there's a very direct relationship between input and output, at least formally when you're in school. Like most of the time, if you study more, if you study harder, you're going to be more successful. Whereas in the workplace, there's so many different dimensions of how to work out, if you're going to be, if you're doing all this work, but you're not getting credit for it, it's almost like the work didn't get done, right? If you're doing all this work, but you don't have any mentors or sponsors that can advocate for you, it's also like you're not going to like benefit from the fruits of your labor. If you are not in a situation where you have others who can build that community amongst yourself so that you can feel confident and speak up in environments, then you're not going to be able to kind of foster the type of career path that you may want. And so there's so many of these aspects of these softer skills of navigating the workplace that just aren't taught. And for me, I think the biggest one was trying to show that I was working hard without actually getting anything done, right? So I'll just give an example. There was one week very early on, I think I was 2 months in, where I actually worked 100 hours in a week. And that, people say that, oh, my work 100 hours a week or whatever. It was 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. for like 5 straight days. That's 19 hours a day for 5 straight days. Then I worked some on the weekend. But it was insane. Like I literally went home and then I just like woke up and then I basically went back to work. And the reason why was because, yes, I had a lot of work. People were out of office or whatever. But really, I was just doing a lot of like busy work that didn't actually matter, but like I thought mattered because I wanted to feel like I was getting something done. So I would like take notes at some of our meetings where no one asked me to take notes, but I was Mr. I'm going to go above and beyond. And it took me a while. And like, that was one of the reasons why I stayed late. I would have catch ups with people and I would send like these elaborate follow-up emails that were just unnecessary, right? Like if you have a catch up with someone for 30 minutes, you don't need to send them like a 300 word follow up, like thank you so much for all of your time. This is what I learned, etc. So there's aspects of like I'm trying to go above and beyond because that's what I've been taught my whole life, and just trying to understand what is actually the value that I'm adding, and like just index on value. Don't index on what I was taught in school to kind of take me to that next level. And like, that was a process to figure that out. It wasn't something that someone just told me initially. And I was lucky to have mentors that were able to tell me like, okay, we should probably stop doing this. My boss grabbed me in a room and said, why are you spending all this time doing all this? Like, what are you doing? How are you working 100 hours? And we worked through it. But I think, there's this transition that I went through that I didn't expect to go through, to be frank, that I really just valued having that perspective and like trying to just help others say, this is going to be hard. It's going to be a transition, but it's okay. It's okay for you not to know everything when you first start. And you have a network of people that can help you get through this process and come out stronger on the other side.
Angel, I really love that simplistic example of you writing these extensive post-meeting follow-ups, because it's really clear in the way that you tell that story. It's so clear how good of intentions you had at every step of the way. You called it out. You're like, I want to be an overachiever. I want to do the things that provide value in the marketplace. And so hearing that story come full circle and hearing you talk about you had to work through that with your mentor, with your boss, and you had to grow through that, it actually shows me that we first must realize the good intentions from a new generation, even if we don't fully understand them, because there are generational differences. But secondly, what really stands out to me is that us as business owners, as businesses, as employers, as leaders, we also have a responsibility to be part of this solution rather than merely pointing the finger. And so along those lines, I want to talk about those two sides of the coin that I teased at the very top of today's episode when it comes to Buddle, which is engaging and retaining that talent, because that's an equation that a lot of people are still trying to figure out. I'm personally trying to figure it out. I've got Gen Z talent on my team behind the scenes. So Angel, what does engagement look like? Let's start there. What does engagement look like with the new generation of talent?
Absolutely. So I read a book recently called Win the Heart. It's by Mark Miller, and they define engagement as the, quote, level of care, right? And so there's a certain threshold where you can say, okay, there's a certain set of tasks, and we have people that are here to do these tasks, and they can either be below the line, at the line, or above the line. And the delta between being above the line and at the line, it's like you have completed the assignment, yet you want to go above and beyond because you care. Because it's not just about getting the work done, but putting in your best effort. And that can only come from something that you feel like you're part of that's bigger than yourself, right? And so there's a big piece of this from an engagement perspective that, you know, when you're a junior, when you're coming into the workplace, when you have all these uncertainties, and you're not understanding necessarily the nuances of how to navigate this space, when you are let in an authentic way, when you feel empowered to say, I can have an impact here and my impact will be recognized, that's when you want to go above and beyond. I mean, I can think of so many examples in my own life where, you know, I've been working on an assignment and, you know, the time flies by versus if I'm just like kind of trying to clock in and clock out. When you get into that state of flow, you're not necessarily as caught up in, okay, is this the bare minimum so I can not be embarrassed by this amount of work? I want to make sure that I'm actually going above and beyond. So how do you actually do that, right? Like that sounds great in theory. What does it look like in practice? The first thing is confidence. The first thing is saying, hey, we're going to have you actually understand the baseline level of skills so that you feel like you can thrive in this environment. You have to really believe that this is something that you can succeed at. And then once you have some element of success, no matter how small, positive reinforcement is absolutely vital, right? I think that people vastly underestimate the importance of someone just saying, hey, that was a nice thing you did. That was a nice email you sent. That was a nice, you know, report that you came up with, even if it's just their job. That can have a major impact. And I think our generation specifically is used to more, you know, instant gratification, right? And so it can feel uncomfortable to provide the kind of support or validation that maybe prior generations didn't receive. But I think if the goal is to have everyone, again, be more engaged, to your point, I think that's a big part of this. And so I would say two main pillars, I think, having people understand the baseline level of soft skills so that they can feel confident to succeed in that workplace. And then once they've demonstrated even a minimum level of confidence, the positive reinforcement so that they continue to go above and beyond.
Yeah, so well said, Injil. I will say, as someone whose love language is words of affirmation, you hit the nail on the head. It feels so good to be seen, to be valued, to be appreciated. And it's such a small thing that goes a long way. So I love the fact that that's a key component of what you just shared with us. Let's flip to the other side of the coin of retaining talent, because I'm going to throw one thing out here that scared all of us earlier in this conversation, Injil. You talked about Gen Zers have a tendency to flip jobs, switch jobs 3 years in. As employers, that's terrifying because we invest so much in their training, in developing their skills. What the heck can we do to retain them? Because I've noticed, especially these days, it's not just about money. There's so much more that goes into it. I think back to your COVID story and I'm like, Injil, being a student during 2020 and 2021, probably values flexibility, probably values freedom, probably values all of those things. So let's talk about retaining talent.
Absolutely. So I think the retention piece is definitely more difficult than just the engagement piece, because you hit it on the head, Brian, is that there's a lot of macro sort of headwinds that can make it more difficult for our generation to feel like they need to stay within one company. One is just culturally, right? People used to be guaranteed pensions if they stayed at a company for a certain period of time. If you change companies, your 401k can be transferred very easily. So there's not this like necessarily like formal retirement benefit that's embedded in staying with a company. You can, if you're reading on LinkedIn or whatever, you can see that, everyone who changes companies has a 20% pay bump. And so you're seeing that kind of content that's more pervasive, I think, than it was 25 years ago, most likely. And so you're fighting against some of these issues. But I think the biggest thing is that people stay in places where they feel comfortable and where they're wanted, right? Like when I think about, even like I was at Goldman for 3 years, the people who I wanted to see every day and just felt comfortable with, they were the reason why I came to work, right? I wanted to do a good job. I love my bosses, etc. But like when I was around people who just made me happy and I was like genuinely friends with, that was a massive part of why I felt like there was just a higher opportunity cost to leaving. Because yes, you can make more money. Yes, you can have a different role or whatever, but like you can't recreate a community that you spent time building and cultivating and creating. And so I think community is actually the vehicle through which you, again, raise the opportunity cost of leaving a company. And so I think that there's so much, this is what we do, right? We try to implement structures that can help foster that community piece. And so you can have junior talent saying, well, I guess this company could offer me $10,000 more, but I would lose out on these 7 people that I've actually like grown with and have networked with. And we're in a situation where regardless of what we end up doing long term, we're building sort of this foundation so that we can grow together. And I think that's the biggest piece, because if you try to just wave these like trinkets in front of people, I think, junior talent today the information is too accessible to try to use non-internal metrics of why people should stay. And so I think it just really has to come from, are you a person who feels like they're part of something that's bigger than themselves? And there's truly like a cost, like there needs to be like a real cost of doing the same job at a different company, at a different place. We believe that can be done mainly through the community.
Yeah, so much actionable stuff here, Injil. That's what I really appreciate about your thoughts on all of this, and especially the business that you've built, is that we as employers, there are steps that we can take to create these environments that, of course, people will be happy in, and of course, people will want to stay in. And I think that that's super powerful. I want to bring it back to technology, though, because speaking about Buddle specifically, to me, that's one of the most fascinating parts about what you're doing behind the scenes, is that you are integrating AI into it as well. We can't have a conversation about Gen Z and not talk about AI, of course. It's changed the way I often do wonder how you guys wrote papers in school with the advent of AI. I imagine it was much easier than what we all used to do. I even think about our parents' generation. They didn't have PCs the way that we did. It was so much harder for them. But Injil, you guys are ahead of the curve when it comes to AI. How are you using AI? How's that powering so much of the work that you guys are doing? I'd love for you to take us behind the scenes.
Sure. So I felt like when I had troubles in the workplace when I first started out, I would like text my mentors basically a brief synopsis of the situation, and they would either call me or like text me back a response with what I should do. I'd be like, hey, I just had a mid-year review with my manager and they said I need to do X, Y, and Z. Do you think that I should push back and say that I did it, or just like let it rock, or whatever? There was like very specific circumstances where I needed help, and it's kind of in the moment, right? So I had a number of mentors, I built that up. I was privileged, whatever. And so I would like text them, either get them on the phone or they would text me back. And so when I was thinking about, how to help solve this problem of Gen Z career preparedness and education, I was like, how can we recreate that? Right. And I mean, just a traditional large language model is a excellent vehicle for helping solve that problem specifically. So I think it was rooted in like, I was able to navigate this problem that I had personally through this vehicle. Is there a way technology can help supplement this process and help us be able to scale it? And I think LLMs for that problem is incredibly valuable. And so the way it works, it's very simple, right? Buddle platform you can log in and then you can ask questions that are related to your junior talent experience. It's meant to be like quick hitters, like questions where, you don't have time to schedule a meeting with your manager that might be 2 weeks out. You need to say, in the moment, I need assistance, I need guidance. What should I do? And so it's trained on, the best research in early career professional development, how to, navigate your career, how to manage up those types of things. And it's meant to help specifically with those coming directly from college. And so, training the model, trying to make it so that, it spoke in a way that was actionable, was valuable. It didn't require you to, go on for years and years before it could give you something that's useful. That was the biggest difficulty. But I think that the technology piece, it just happened to be the perfect vehicle to solve that problem. But the problem was there before AI was there or not. It's just that beforehand, like you were mentioning, we had to write our own papers. Now people can use ChatGPT to write their papers. Before, I would text my mentor like, hey, this is what happened. What should I do? Now you can do that at scale in the moment. If your mentor is in the bathroom or whatever, you can still get something that can help you navigate the workplace. It's really just about our vision that there are very specific moments that make a huge difference in your career. And in those moments, everything matters. And so you need something at that time, at that place to help you succeed.
Yes, I love that perspective. Speed matters, and having those direct answers, it also, I think we all know in the heat of the moment, it helps to just take a step back and say, hold on, let me actually just get a different outside perspective here. And you're right, that's what large language models are so good at doing. They remove a lot of the emotion from the real world stuff that we face in the workplace. So I love that. Angel, I knew that time would fly by with you today, but I want to squeeze in 2 questions. And one of them you're going to be totally unprepared for because it's just totally off the cuff. The more I hear you talk about these things, I love the fact that you're helping Gen Zers with their career path and their professional development. But what I will inject into this conversation is that I also think that Gen Z is going to be a super entrepreneurial generation. I think that the freedom that you're all used to, heck, I don't even need to say it because Angel, you're such a shining example of this in display, is that you have seen a solution or you've seen a problem in the marketplace and you're bringing a solution. You're not thinking about it. You're not talking about it. You've actually done that with Buddle. And so I know that the professional development that you're helping so many people with, it's going to lead to more entrepreneurial careers. So with that in mind, knowing you've also been a 9-to-5er, Angela, how has the entrepreneurial journey been for you? What are some of those things that have been surprising for you that's completely different? What are those things that you've stepped into and you go, wow, I love this part of being an entrepreneur? I'd love to hear how that transition's been.
For sure. So I think I have a more non-traditional kind of breakthrough into entrepreneurship. What happened was, honestly, I had a conversation with a mentor last summer and I was like, things are going well. I really like my job, love what I'm doing, great team, etc. But, at some point I may want to try entrepreneurship, maybe later down the line. And they looked at me and they were like, well, I mean, the best time to do it is now. You have no kids, you have no mortgage, no dependents. You can kind of go wherever you want in the world, not married. So, I mean, why would you kind of wait? And I was like, wow, that's actually true. That's very good perspective. So I literally quit 2 weeks later. I quit 2 weeks after I signed my lease for another year. So I truly, like, if there's any evidence that I had no idea I literally signed another year of a lease, probably would have maybe lived somewhere else or something if I was going to, give up my income for that long. So no, it truly was this is a moment in time where it makes sense to take this leap, and I'm going to take this leap. And to be honest with you, Brian, like, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just said, I'm going to try this thing. And so I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, what do I know? What have I done? Well, I did 3 years at Goldman, so I guess I know about early career professional development. So let's do something with that. And so I literally started out and I was like, AI for early career professional development. That was like the business. That was what we were doing. And I talked with a bunch of different people, mainly, again, like early career people, worked on like building out the platform, training the model, etc. And then we went to some potential customers because we sell to businesses. Went to potential customers and we were like, hey, we have this, this new AI thing for help for early career development. They were like, cool. Like good for you. Nice project. And I was like, well, I mean, do you want to buy it? Like, what's going on? They were like, oh, no. Like, why would we want to buy that? And so I think the biggest thing for me is that, I did this entrepreneurial thing. I was like, oh, like, we're going to do AI. It's going to be for this thing that I know. It's going to be easy. Like, we're going to, it's going to be great. We're going to make $1 billion in like 3 weeks. And then I actually like tried to talk to people that would actually be the buyers, and they were like, "That's cool, but like, what is this doing for me?" And so we really just went back to the drawing board, and we were like, "Okay, what problem are we solving? What is the actual need that we're filling?" And that's when we said, "Okay, it's about retention. It's about engagement. You are hiring these people and they're leaving and they're quitting. And the reason why, which I know, is because they're not prepared. They don't feel like they can be successful. And so how do you package it in a way that makes it so that you're solving that problem and only bring up the AI piece if people want to hear about it? Because the one thing that I learned is that sometimes people don't want to hear about this technology. You don't want to, hit people over the head with this is how cool it is. This is all it does. Because they're like, oh my God, I just want something that's simple and easy. Right. And so what we found is that when we started talking about the problem that we were solving, people got a lot more interested. And like, in hindsight, I say this and it's like, it's obvious, but that's the entrepreneurial journey. I mean, it's been so much fun. Just like, you'll never know until you talk to someone and ask them to buy something if it's actually legitimate. That's what I've learned. Because I was like, lock myself in my room training this model for months and then finally talked to someone and they were like, this is cool, but why would I ever want to buy this? And that has been the process that has been the most fascinating, is like, you just have to try things. You have to talk to people and ask real questions and use their feedback to like iterate. I thought this was, frankly, I was like, okay, well, I have a great background. Like, this is a cool idea where this just is going to work. And it's like, well, not necessarily. You have to really just always be rooted in the problem, and the solution, it will reveal itself if you stay close to the problem.
Yes, I love that story for so many reasons, Injil, especially because I think that right there is the perfect illustration that even in a short amount of time, whatever business you think it is that you're building, gosh, you can't be married to it. You have to be so ready to be flexible and navigate through all the turns and twists and challenges that we face along the way. And in your case, I think that it made Buddle a way stronger offering. And it's really cool to see the foundations of the company that you've built, because anyone who goes to your website, and we're going to drop that link in just a few minutes, they're going to look at it and say, this is the finished product. Like, this is unbelievable what you guys have built at Buddle. And it's because we're getting a little bit of behind the scenes here, is that you've been flexible. You've listened to the market. You've talked to the market. And of course, you've listened to them and you've made changes, and it's made your company so much stronger. So I love that. And with that entrepreneurial hat on, I'm going to ask you the question I ask at the end of every episode. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? I feel like you dropped so many nuggets of knowledge. I don't know how you're going to top any of them, but knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, what's that one piece of entrepreneurial advice that you want to leave them with today?
So I'm in no position to give entrepreneurial advice, but I will obviously still answer. What I've learned is that the only way to figure something out is to give it your full, undivided attention, right? Like, I think that there's so many ways that you can like test the waters and dip your feet in something and say, oh, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe this could be interesting. Until you really say, this is what I'm going to focus on, like almost singularly, it's very hard to see if something will work. And the effort that you put into really going all the way is never in vain. That's what I've learned. Like, you're never going to be in a situation where you said, oh my God, I can't believe I wasted all that time trying this thing out, because, in all labor, there's profit. You're always going to learn something from putting your time in. And so I've just learned that, if there's an opportunity that I think makes sense, I honestly just go all in for it and then see what comes of it. Because if you go halfway, you're not really going to know if it's a good idea, if it's a bad idea, if it worked, if it didn't work. If you make the decision that something is worth pursuing, pursue it wholeheartedly, and you'll be so much better off that you made that leap.
Yes, I love that advice. Way too often, as someone who interviews entrepreneurs for a living, I see that it feels safer to do the entrepreneurial hokey pokey, put one foot in, take one foot out, and really just be teetering on that edge. But Injil, just like yourself, a lot of successful entrepreneurs come to that realization where they say, you know what, enough is enough. If I believe in this, then I have an obligation and a duty to follow this through. And huge kudos to you and everybody involved with Buddle, because that's exactly what you're doing. And you're such a shining example. Hey, you said you're in no position to give entrepreneurial advice, but you are, because you're doing it. And that's the stuff that matters, is the people who are in the arena. They're the ones who can offer the advice. So with that in mind, Injil, I know that people are going to be excited to check out all the great stuff that you're doing. I've teased your website just a little bit, but drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Sure. So our website is buddleplatform.com, Buddle, like huddle with a B, platform.com. And then you can follow me on LinkedIn, follow our company on LinkedIn. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. So I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Brian, and it's this is exciting stuff. Seriously,
Yes.
so I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that, Injil. And listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. You don't have to remember things. If you're on the go, if you're at the gym, if you're driving, you can click right on through from the show notes or on our website, wherever the heck it is that you're tuning into podcasts these days. Injil, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Truly a pleasure, Brian. Thank you for having me.